His name is Adolf Hitler, and this is his biography. The Nazi blitzkrieg smashes through Poland. Before this, Adolf Hitler has used threats, blackmail, and phony promises of peace to take over Austria and Czechoslovakia. Now, he tells his generals, further successes can no longer be attained without the shedding of blood. Hitler meets with his high command after the swift fall of Poland. He says, "No one has ever achieved what I have achieved. The fate of the Reich depends only on me." He commands that the German armies march across Europe. France and Great Britain, he says, will be conquered. But Denmark, Norway, and Holland must come first. Hitler now unleashes devastating mechanized warfare upon them. And the three little nations are overwhelmed in the early spring of 1940. Then the Nazi panzer divisions push into Belgium, where they are challenged for the first time by French and British troops. The war is now engulfing all of Europe as the Allied armies wither under the German attack. Over 300,000 French and British troops retreat until they're trapped on the beach at Dunkirk, their backs to the English Channel. Hermann Goering, chief of the Luftwaffe, wants the glory of annihilating the surrounded troops at Dunkirk. He asks Hitler for permission, and he gets it. In its job. Despite merciless bombing, the enemy is able to escape by sea. But France, riddled with defeatism, surrenders almost as quickly as Poland and Norway. This is springtime in Paris in 1940. Humiliates the French, forces them to sign an armistice in the same railway car in which Germany had surrendered after the First World War. This scene was witnessed personally by a correspondent, William L. Shirer. Hitler's face, he writes, is afire with scorn, anger, hate, revenge, and triumph. Hitler calls this the greatest and finest moment of my life. Hitler Hitler again turns to his Luftwaffe, orders his Air Force to bring Great Britain to her knees. Long months, the tiny island, fighting alone, reels under the Nazi blitz. But then the tide turns in the Battle of Britain. The outnumbered Royal Air Force challenges the mighty Luftwaffe, and the Nazis suffer staggering losses. The RAF saves Britain. Winston Churchill says, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Hitler is stunned by this reversal. He is accustomed to quick victories. He decides the conquest of Great Britain can wait. Instead, he will turn to the east. He will break his non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union and invade Russia with what he calls unprecedented, unmerciful, and unrelenting harshness. The world, declares Hitler, will hold its breath. His German armies slash through the Soviet Union, surge toward Moscow and Leningrad. This year, boasts Field Marshal Goering, between 20 and 30 million persons will die of hunger in Russia. Perhaps it is well that it is so, for certain nations must be decimated. This is Berchtesgaden, a mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps, where Adolf Hitler escapes the savagery of war and spends tranquil interludes with his mistress, Eva Braun. She had been a shop girl when Hitler met her during his early rise to power. Few people in Germany know anything about her, for Hitler hides her from the public. When Hitler is away, she divides her time between her two main interests, popular novels and physical culture. Hitler has a peculiar relationship with Eva. He boasts to her of other romantic conquests. He forbids her to dance or sing in his presence. He drives her to attempt suicide twice. An ardent movie fan, Eva has a crush on the American actor Robert Taylor. She possesses what one observer calls a bird-like mind. And this does not displease Hitler, for he has told a friend, the greater the man, the more insignificant the woman. Adolf Hitler fancies himself a music lover. His favorite popular song, which he frequently orders his butler to sing for him at Berchtesgaden, is Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? Hitler and Eva are sometimes joined here by Eva's parents and by her sister Gretel. Years before, Eva's father, a school teacher, had objected to her relationship with Hitler. Eva is such a nice, sweet girl, he complained. Why did she go off and hand herself to that ogre? But now, as Hitler's armies overrun Europe, Herr Braun enjoys the Führer's hospitality. The battle on the Russian front permits the Führer little time for the pleasures of Berchtesgaden. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and this news staggers Hitler. He had hoped to keep the powerful United States out of the war for at least another year. Now, Hitler has no choice. He declares war on the United States. The German nation, he says, wants only its rights, and we will secure for ourselves this right to live, even if thousands of Churchills and Roosevelts conspire against us. The conqueror who ordered his Luftwaffe to slaughter defenseless civilians must now face the combined might of Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. And Adolf Hitler begins to understand that he is fighting for his life. Adolf Hitler is fighting on two fronts, in the Soviet Union and in North Africa. The pressures of war have begun to take their toll. His hair is turning gray. He tells his friend Goebbels that he suffers attacks of giddiness. Hitler is worried about the North African campaign. General Rommel's Africa Corps had been scoring brilliant victories. But now the Desert Fox is in trouble. He's running short on weapons and supplies. And Hitler, in a fatal blunder, refuses to send more. Rommel wants to retreat, but Hitler issues an order. You can show your troops, he says, no other way than that which leads to victory or to death. Germany loses this duel in the desert, and this is the beginning of the end for Adolf Hitler. Hitler's next disaster comes at Stalingrad. The Red Army and the Russian winter take a staggering toll on the German army. Hitler's commanding general sends him an urgent message. Troops without ammunition, further defense senseless, collapse inevitable. But Hitler replies from his headquarters in Germany, surrender is forbidden. Hold positions to the last man. When he learns that 90,000 Nazi soldiers have surrendered at Stalingrad, Hitler says they should have shot themselves with their last bullets. American troops liberate Rome in June of 1944 after invading what is called the soft underbelly of Europe. Hitler prepares now for the Allies' next blow, which he expects somewhere along the English Channel on the coast of France. He is confident that the German army can easily repel an attack. The entire coastline bristles with defenses, and Hitler proudly calls this barrier his impregnable Atlantic Wall. D-Day, the 6th of June, 1944, the invasion at Normandy. Through misinformation and indecisiveness, the German High Command is unable to beat back the greatest invasion armada in history. In the middle of that fateful day, Hitler, at Berchtesgaden, is given a briefing on the invasion. He issues a ludicrous command. The invaders, he says, must be driven into the sea not later than tonight. But in the days that follow, more than 300,000 Allied troops come ashore. Hitler's impregnable Atlantic Wall has collapsed. The Fuhrer holds a high-level meeting shortly after D-Day. He doesn't know it, but a clique of German officers are sick of the war, disgusted with Hitler, and they plan to assassinate him that very afternoon. A war hero has planted a time bomb in a briefcase just 6 feet from Hitler's legs. Another officer, however, has accidentally moved the briefcase away from Hitler. Most of the officers in the room are killed or badly wounded in the blast. Hitler, however, escapes with severe burns and a partially paralyzed right arm. Later that afternoon, he meets Mussolini and tells him, "Having escaped death, I am convinced that the great cause which I serve can be brought to a good end." And Mussolini tells Hitler, "What has happened here today gives me new courage." This is the last time they meet. Within a year, Mussolini's corpse will hang by its heels in the streets of Milan. The men who tried to assassinate Hitler are put on public trial. They are tormented by the prosecutor, by their own defense attorneys, and even by the judge, who will be described later as a vile, vituperative maniac.
Meine Früchtchen. Ja, meine Früchtchen. Die haben gewartet, bis man die Dienstverpflichteten. Und wo sind sie hingegangen? Chemische Erzeugung, haben keine Ahnung von Chemie. Werden Sie lieber eine Knarre in die Hand genommen, wäre ich auf dumme Gedanken gekommen. Aber natürlich, die haben ja bestätigt, dass die KBO sind. Also, und werden die hier nicht unverstehen. Mit Ihnen werden wir fertig, Firma. Die sind nicht berufen, hier Sie ein Urteil anzumaßen, und sie nur dazu da sind, sich auf die Äußerung, auf die Verräter.
The defendants explain that they wanted to kill Hitler to put an end to Nazi atrocities.
Aus dieser Zeit heraus ein vielfaches Hin und Her in der Einstellung gegenüber den Polen praktisch erlebt habe. Das ist eine wesentliche Gedacht an die vielen Morde.
Morde?
Don't get arrogant, says the judge. We'll do away with your kind.
Ja, also OKH, Sacharbeit.
The judge calls them tramps and traitors. Hitler orders that the conspirators be hanged like cattle by piano wire attached to meat hooks. Now the tempo of Hitler's savagery begins to mount. His concentration camps have become factories of death for 5 million European Jews and other so-called undesirables. Most of the German people are callous to the carnage going on in their midst. They join Hitler in celebrating his 55th birthday in 1944. Most of them will follow him blindly until the very end. The Allied armies are closing in on Hitler's Third Reich. The British and Americans from the west, the Russians from the east. Hitler is trapped. The Germans counterattack in the winter of 1944. This Battle of the Bulge is Hitler's last desperate gamble. He says, "We shall yet master fate." But his last gamble fails. The Allied armies push across the Rhine and into Germany. Hitler establishes new headquarters in an underground bunker at the Chancellery in Berlin, where he will finally marry his mistress, Eva Braun. He has already had several nervous breakdowns, and a German officer says his face and eyes give the impression of total exhaustion. All his movements are those of a senile man. The Red Army penetrates the outskirts of Berlin. only a few miles from Hitler's bunker. Below ground, Hitler writes his last will and testament. Then the Fuhrer reflects on all he has done and calls it a glorious and heroic struggle. I die, he says, with a joyful heart. A Soviet cannon barrage demolishes the chancellery above his bunker. The next day, Russian troops press to within a block of Hitler's bunker. And as the street battle rages, Hitler and Eva Braun retire to a subterranean room. With the clatter of machine gun fire in their ears, Eva Braun takes poison, and Hitler puts a revolver to his mouth and pulls the trigger. Behind the shattered walls of the Chancellery, the bodies of Adolf Hitler and his bride are burned. Days when Hitler embarked on his murderous career, his cohort Joseph Goebbels made a prediction. Once we have the power, he said, we will never give it up. They will have to carry away our dead bodies. Joseph Goebbels was right.